Here.
Commissioner McGahey.
Here.
Commissioner Munsell.
Um, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to excuse Commissioner Munsell.
All in favor?
There's no support.
Oh, pardon me.
Yep.
Pardon me. Okay, Commissioner Munson will not be excused. Pledge of Allegiance. Jim Hendricks, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim.
City Manager.
The first item on the agenda tonight is a public hearing on the proposed rezoning as requested by the EUP Veterans Center Foundation, Inc.
Oh, excuse me, Andrew. Commissioner Bosphus would like to make a statement before we start the public hearing. Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before the public hearing begins, I would like to ask for a ruling on why the city attorney feels that I cannot participate in the discussion and cannot vote on this matter. Personally, I serve as a volunteer board member on the Veterans Project, and I have no financial interest or directly or indirectly in this project. And if allowed to vote, I would certainly vote in the affirmative. I'd like to ask the city attorney for a ruling.
The financial interest is not the applicable element of inquiry, it's compatibility. And commissioners are not allowed to sit in incompatible positions. Those would be positions where they are ruling on their own activities, so to speak. And as a board member of an organization applying for a special treatment in some respect from the city commission, such as a rezoning, if you were on that board, you would be in an incompatible position with voting on that issue on this board. And the rule is you must disclose the incompatibility, and then you're not allowed to participate in the discussion or the voting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. City Manager.
Okay, as indicated, the first item is the proposed public hearing on the rezoning issue as requested by the EUP Veterans Center Foundation, Inc. At the June 19th, 2000 City Commission meeting, an ordinance was introduced for first reading to rezone from I-1 Light Industrial District to RM-1 Multifamily Residential Low-Rise Lots 1 through 13, Block 3, Emmeline Woods Addition, and Lot 403, Assessor Subdivision Number 8, as requested by the EUP Veterans Center Foundation, Inc. Planning and Development Commission has heard this request from the Veterans Foundation to rezone the property at an earlier meeting. The Planning and Development Commission motion to recommend the rezoning did not pass on a 3-3 vote. We have, as you are also aware, a petition that has come from the area property owners expressing their opposition to rezoning. The ordinance on the any rezoning issues requires that a supermajority vote be required of the City Commission if a petition has been submitted and signed by more than 20% of the owners of property within the land area. The petition did include, I believe the percentage was 33% of the land by ownership in that particular area, which triggers the supermajority vote that is required for this particular issue. But that's basically the summary of the rezoning issue, and at this point I would recommend that the mayor conduct a public hearing on this proposed rezoning.
The public hearing is open, and I'd like to make just a brief statement before we start. I expect no personal attacks of anyone in the commission room or on the commission. I think we can handle this public hearing in a real congenial manner. We can disagree, but that doesn't mean that we have to insult or start any. And if any discord starts, I will ask the police to come up and remove the person. So with that, the public hearing is open, and
I'm not sure
Sure.
Who are you representing, Mr.
John
Kelly?
Kelly from the Community Action Agency, representing Community Action Agency and the veterans, and asking for changing of a land zone from a light industrial to an RM1, as it is in the adjoining neighborhood.
Okay.
And I would like to present to the commission at the appropriate time Mark McDaniel. Some of you have met in the past, who is the representative of the Michigan Capital Fund. Mr. McDaniel has worked with us in development of various properties and will be assisting us here on the money development of this property as well. If you want the drawing, joining this,
We should have some tape or something.
I don't know where you can put them, but they'll stand here anyway. I'm sorry if you can't see them back there, but, the,
Can't vote, you might as well hold it.
We'll let you hold it.
hey. So, if I understand it correctly, one commissioner is not able to participate, although he's doing a fine job holding it. Is the supermajority then remain at 5, or does the supermajority change to 4?
Are you asking the city attorney? City attorney, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The supermajority remains at 5. Under state law, it takes 4 votes to enact an ordinance. And if a petition has been filed by more than 20% of the area within 100 feet of the proposed boundaries of the rezoning parcel, the majority increases to 5. Those are firm majorities, not based on quorum and attendance.
Thank you. It hadn't been said, and I did want that said. We joined with the veterans, mayor and members of the commission, to assist them in obtaining the amount of monies that would be necessary to build a facility so that they could leave the facility that they're presently in. The intent was to have a facility that would service the needs of the homeless people, and at the same time, it would be a facility that the community would be proud of having. We're presently looking at a $2.5 million facility, or projected $2.5 million, depending on bids. And you can see we have the drawings, the renderings from the architects here. As in selecting the land, we worked with the city staff and making sure that we could find a piece of property that would be agreed upon. When we selected the piece of property that we are proposing to be rezoned, we did so with the idea we would be able to have enough room in which the facility could be laid out so that there would be a recreational area, areas for parking, and that a facility would be far enough away from the street, unlike the present facility that presently exists. It was designed with the idea of a berm around it, so that it'll give the facility a sense of privacy and kind of isolated, if you will, from the adjoining area. And we did that because of the concerns that I had heard listening to the voice of the residents in that area as they singled out their concerns for the facility. It's presently, it's approximately 21,500 square foot facility. If you will, it's U-shaped. Across the one side would be 24 single units, efficiency apartments, and across the other portion of the U would be 6 family units, 2 and 3 bedroom. Through the center portion of the building, there are 6 small offices, there are classrooms, kitchen, pantry, storage, community day room, lobby, laundry facilities, day and night management offices. This apartment type facility would be managed by the Community Action Agency, if it is constructed. And we would be a part of this development for a minimum of 5 years, so that we could make sure that the management of the facility would be adequate to satisfy the needs of the people who were coming up with the $2.5 million. There has been a concern voiced to you, and I'll ask Mark to help here in a minute on that. What's the rush? Why not go for next year or whatever else? And I think I indicated to you in my last address that the facility that the folks are in today is certainly not the most desirous. As I speak to you, there are 41 people in that residence tonight. 20 of them people are children, 21 are adults, and the vast majority are from this area. I would rather have a better separation of children and adult facility than we have now. And as you can see from our design, it's laid out so that that separation does take place. Mark, maybe I'd ask if you would talk about the city plan and how we address that in our seeking property to get where we're at.
Thank you. When we were approached a year ago by the Veterans Organization, being the Capital Fund, the Michigan Capital Fund for Housing. We're a nonprofit housing corporation that works here in Michigan, raising investment funds to invest in affordable housing throughout the state. We go to corporate and financial institutions as investors. They invest in our work, and we take their money and invest it into projects like this. Since our beginning in 1993, we've raised $176 million that have been invested and committed into developments around the state. A number of those are here in the Upper Peninsula, all the way from doing homeless, single-room occupancy projects, transitional housing for single mothers, homes for mentally disabled, to senior citizen complexes, similar to what Avery Square is downtown, which I was the co-developer with Community Action on over the last 12 years, to family housing of all types, single-family homes. We have a lot of experience in this and raising funds. One of the key things is for us to raise that sum of money from investors is that we've got to ensure that these properties are successful. They're successful financially, and they're successful being operated and managed and serving the purpose that they're supposed to serve. If one of our investors, and just name some of them, would be like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, if you're familiar with them, the single-family secondary mortgage market groups, all the banks, National City, Old Kent, Comerica, Huntington, North Country Bank, Michigan Financial Corporation, which is now Wells Fargo out of Marquette, Standard Federal, I mean, a very long list of investors. All of them are very concerned. The reason that they work with us, put their money in through us, is that we underwrite these projects very, very closely. We're very concerned about the ability and capacity of the development team, the builder, the developer owner, especially in these kinds of projects, the management team and the group that's running the programs. Management and social programs are different. We look at the capacity of those people and how they do that, and the financial feasibility. And as a result, we find ourselves working very closely with bringing all the various parts of this financial puzzle together. One of which, in this particular project I'll use the example of, is that Ryan mentioned about a $2.5 million development cost. Of that, our organization is putting in about $1.2 million from our investors. The rest is coming from the State Housing Development Authority. We're getting a home loan from them, home program loan of close to $900,000. And then through their MISHDA's homeless financing program, through the supportive housing program that HUD has, that they run through MISHDA, another $400,000. These are for construction costs. There's an additional $300 and some thousand that would be coming from HUD through SHP that would fund the operating program, the social program for 3 years. Then putting in $1.2 million of investors' money, obviously they're pretty concerned as to what we're putting their money into and how is it going to be successful. And the last thing any one of them wants, and this is when they come to us, it comes up a lot of times, is the last thing they want to have is their name on the front page of the local newspaper about a problem in a project that they've invested in. So we have to do a lot of work on the front end on ensuring that that doesn't happen. So we're very, very active in overseeing these and seeing that the project is operating properly and serving the need that it was meant to serve. As a result of our experience in this, the Veterans Foundation sought us out a year ago, asking for our help. If we could bring investment funds to the Sioux to do a project like this. And then also our experience in working with the other funding sources, if we could bring that together. We said absolutely, that's what we're about, that's what we do. But you need to find an appropriate piece of property for it. And when you're dealing with these types of developments, you know, property is always an issue. Is it the right location? Is there support for it? Those types of things. So the first place you look is typically you go to the local planning director, the local, you know, officials, and ask where can a project like this, you know, is best suited in the community. Well, the first place they're going to look at is what's the land use plan say. What's the land use plan and master plan for the area say? And we're talking about land use. We're not talking about a specific proposal like this. Because when you're talking about, you know, land use, it's what's the appropriate use, in this particular case, multifamily housing. Happens that we're having a project that's generating this discussion, but is multifamily housing appropriate in this area or any other area in the city? So, given that, the approach, they had another site that they brought to us, and it was found unacceptable by your planning people here. It did not fit the criteria for appropriate land use. So they looked again and found that this particular area was conducive, based on what your land use plan, which was done in 1995, looking at the idea of transition zones. And I want to read this from your plan. It says that when the situations occur where one land use type will lie next to a completely different one, for example, where the edge of a single family area abuts a commercial district, it is here that the concept of transition becomes all important. In general, all land uses in the community can be placed in a hierarchy, beginning with those that require the most protection and proceeding down a list to the most intensive, active, and intense activities. Typically, this hierarchy is reflected in a typical zoning ordinance, and the order will be similar to this, where single family being the lowest density, needs the most protection, all the way to industrial. Industrial being the highest, most intense use that you can have for land use. And conflicts between two different land uses can be minimized if the two uses are next to each other in the hierarchy. For example, single family placed next to two family or multiple family next to office. Transition problems generally arise when two land uses which are widely separated on the hierarchy fall next to each other, such as single family next to commercial or next to industrial land use. It was this plan that was the basis for finding and determining that this was an appropriate use, multifamily, in this area, and as such, the property was identified as something that would work for a multifamily proposal. And that's what the group proceeded with, that's what we as a potential investor proceeded with, is the appropriateness of the land use. And that's what we're talking about, is land use is multifamily in this area. And it, you know, based on planning principles and that, it is appropriate. So that's how we came into this. Now, as since then, a year ago, they came back, showed us this property, said, you know, they were directed to this, that it was appropriate in the land use plan. And so we then went out and sought other sources of financing for this. And it's kind of a unique, as Ron was saying, there is a timing issue with this, and unfortunately, you know, it has people concerned about exactly what's going on and why. But it's a very unique opportunity in this year when it comes to supportive housing financing. The Michigan State Housing Development Authority brought a national organization into the state called the Corporation for Supportive Housing, a national nonprofit that basically works on putting together these kinds of projects. With them coming in, MSHDA sought them out to bring them into the state. They have targeted, 3 years ago, they targeted 4 areas in the state to bring their resources to bear, at the same time leveraging the resources that the Housing Authority has. Those were all downstate. They've just resubmitted for their next go-around, their next commitment of 3 years, of which Northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula are part of the new target area for them. This project is one that we brought to them that got them to commit to including Northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula as their new target for the next 3 years. So they committed to this. As a result, the Housing Authority has committed to see that this project happens. Now, we're using the low-income housing tax credit program to raise the investment funds. Our investors get a tax credit for investing into these types of projects. They're in it for at least 15 years, no getting out. They're coming in as partners and investing in this property for 15 years. But they have to apply to the Housing Authority to get those tax credits allocated. It's very competitive, and that's what this July 15th deadline everybody's talking about, is that there's only 2 times a year that you can apply for tax credits. The last time this year is on July 15th. They have what's called a qualified allocation plan. In that plan, it's published every year, and it's redone every year to target where they want their funds to go. This year, supportive housing is their target. Okay, next year may not be. They typically, every year, it's kind of a different thing. So the likelihood of being competitive and getting a tax credit allocation for the investors in this round is very high to be able to make this project happen. So that's what July 15th is about. This is, you know, we have that. The other is the home funds from MSHDA. Home funds typically that have been targeted to this Corporation for Supportive Housing initiative we wouldn't have been eligible for them until next year, and we would have had to compete with all these other areas, including Detroit and the Muskegon area, for those funds. They had a project this year, 2 months ago, that did not perform on a commitment of home funds, and so that money came back to the authority. The authority.
Mr. McDaniel, I want to give you 5 minutes, and then we'll hear from the other side, and then anyone else can speak after that. 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The authority then designated these funds to this project because they're only available this year. So it's a very unique situation that we're faced with, that all these things kind of lined up. But the key thing is this tax credit round that's coming up in July that we're trying to get through with all this. But you know, that I think covers you know, the financing and the process we're faced with. I hope it answers some of the questions about some of this, you know, the short time frame and why. But it is a very unique position that this project is in. We've got a lot of people's attention on wanting to fund it and support it. And again, like I said, you know, it's a land use issue about, is this an appropriate use for land for multifamily housing? And that's what we're here to talk about.
So, thank you, Your Honor. We tried to, in the time frame, give you a quick synopsis of our request for a land use zoning change. And if you have questions concerning that, we'd be happy to address them.
We'll hear from the other side, then we'll go to the commission for questions. Thank you. and the spokesperson for the neighborhood. Laurie?
You know the facts better than any of us.
Can I speak in here?
No, I'm afraid to get the microphone, please.
Get over it.
Okay. Well, I've made some notes.
Would you
on things-
introduce yourself,
Oh,
please,
Lori
Laurie?
Jump. I live at 411 Ridge Street, which is directly across from the proposed site for this project. And I'll probably be a little not very organized in my thoughts, but I've made a couple of notes. First of all, I guess our initial opposition to this project and primary opposition is the location that they are suggesting. It fronts our neighborhood. Everybody's saying that it's on the edge of a neighborhood. It's not in the middle of the neighborhood. While I take offense to that, it's in my front yard. And there are plenty of other areas within this city or within the county where a project such as this could be placed. Doesn't have to be in a residential neighborhood. In fact, we identified a piece of property out on M129 that would be perfect for this property. They've stated that they'd like to have a basement. You can't have a basement in the location they've selected. It's rock. I cannot dig in my yard. It's practically solid rock. The location on M129 could have a basement. On 129, they would be directly across from the FIA building, which is where I would imagine many of the people that they are proposing to serve will have to access services. Not only that, the tribal health facility is on M129. Veterans utilize that facility for medical care. They're partnering with Community Action, who provides dial-a-ride transportation within this city. I mean, it's, so any opposition they have to that particular piece of property, I think we could overcome. A couple of things. They've mentioned, some things have changed. Since we've been talking about this, we had a June 22nd deadline, a July 1st deadline, now it's a July 15th deadline. Every time we meet, it's something different. The proposed project was supposed to have 20 single units, 10 family. Now it's 24 single, 6 family. They're proposing this as a veterans facility. And I'm sorry, we're not opposed to services, not only not to veterans, but to the homeless in general. But this is not a veterans issue. This project does not target veterans. The primary target for this facility are chronic substance abusers, dual diagnosis, which is a diagnosis of substance abuse and mental health, mental illness. And the third one is AIDS victims. None of those, certainly there may be veterans in those groups, but that is the target for this project. It's not veterans, and anybody that thinks it is veterans is wrong. So this is not a veterans issue, it's not a patriotic issue, and if you read the grant that I gave you last week, you'll find that that's their target. The service area. If they were proposing to take people from Chippewa County, we wouldn't have a problem probably with this facility, but they're not. Joe Coulard stated to us here at a meeting, the Marines saying we will leave no one behind. He's telling us they'll take them from anywhere that are homeless for any reason. And we don't believe that you should concentrate troubled persons in any one area. This county has a waiting list for any service you want to access. Mental health, substance abuse, they all have waiting lists, and I can tell you that because I've worked with the court system for 10 years. And we want to bring people to this area without proposing new services. This grant says that they're going to utilize existing services. Those services are already to the max. There's waiting lists. And yet we want to bring in from anywhere people to utilize those same services. We can't meet the needs of our own county, much less the state of Michigan, out of state, downstate, across the country. So that's an issue. Staffing. This grant proposes that their staffing will be one house manager and a desk clerk who, as often as possible, will be a resident of that facility. That's the current staffing that they have at the existing shelter, and let me tell you, it doesn't work. You know, they have a zero tolerance policy for substance abuse. We've seen people go in that have been drinking and not come back out. On the other hand, we've seen them come back out with no place else to go. When they're kicked out of that facility, we were told at a meeting, we don't care where they go. That's not our responsibility. It is their responsibility. If they're bringing them to this community, most definitely is their responsibility. They're telling us, why don't you call the police when you see something going wrong? It's not our responsibility to police their facility. We shouldn't have to call the police when somebody from their facility gets kicked out. That's not my job. I shouldn't have to worry where somebody is going to go when they're kicked out from that facility. Whose backyard are they going to end up in when they're drunk? Where are they going to go? You know, bad enough when it's summertime and they can go and sleep under a tree somewhere. What happens in the wintertime? There's no other place for these people to go. And so they're found in garages, that's not safe. And yet, by their own words, we don't care where they go. That was stated to us at the meeting between the residents and the Veterans Center. The grant. The grant that I gave you implies a whole lot of community support. It clearly states not to list any amount of funding unless they had a signed commitment for that funding. Well, this board found out last week that they listed a $15,000 tax abatement from the city, which hasn't even come before you. They hadn't even requested it when they wrote this grant. On Tuesday, I went to the Sioux Tribe board meeting in St. Ignace. This grant lists a $100,000 commitment from Sioux Tribe. And I asked the board of directors there, have we committed $100,000 to this project? Their answer was no. They knew nothing about it. There has not been a request for 2% monies to support this project, nor any other request. And yet, this grant makes it look like this entire community is supporting this project. You know, I'd like to know how many other people that were listed here have actually committed monies. Maybe none. And yet, MISHDA obviously thinks the entire community is in support. I guess one of the other things that I wanted to mention is that now previously Mr. Bosphus made a statement that the current shelter was in such a state of disrepair and was unsafe, and that's why they wanted to do that. And you heard the gentleman today stand up here and say basically the very same thing. This grant tells us that the existing facility will be the main source of referrals for this project. So, what does that tell you? They're not going to close that facility. Now we're not going to have just one homeless shelter, we're going to have two. And instead of 40 people in a shelter, we're going to have 80 or 100. You know? And we don't have the services here in this community. And they shouldn't be left to wander anybody's neighborhood. It shouldn't be in my neighborhood. It shouldn't be in your neighborhood. Or next to the Sulaks or down there. They want to tell us that this is strictly a land use issue. It's not. It's much more than that. It's all about what's going to happen once the facility is here, who's going to police it, who's going to make sure these people are safe, and where are they going to get the services. Because let me tell you something, if they build this facility, people are going to come. It's going to get filled. And how are we going to deal with that? Thank you.
Anderson. I pastor the Presbyterian church here in town. Recently, we were made homeless by a fire. Thank goodness for the Methodists who took us in for a month, and the Baptists that we've signed a lease with for 6 months, renewable 3 times over the next year and a half. From what I know of this project, and I certainly do not know everything, I'm learning as I stand and listen tonight. And I speak not as one who knows everything. I speak as one who knows something about himself and something about humanity. And I speak as one who knows something about fear and anger and resentment. And I speak as one who has been in this community for 12 years and who has, in a small way, worked with homeless people over those 12 years. Recently, was involved with Habitat for Humanity, helped build 6 houses for Habitat for Humanity. Our church has had a soup kitchen over the years. I can stand here and tell you that the homeless folks are not all bad folks. Our church has been reached out to by many in this community. Community leaders, the mayor, among others. Several churches in this area, several churches across the river, several churches in the Upper Peninsula, churches below. Some have sent prayers, money, so forth and so on. But the one gift that has meant the most to me was a velvet picture of this homeless guy who is no longer homeless, who has benefited from the shelter and what services it has had to offer. Brought by my house one Saturday night, and he said, Pastor, I'm sorry that your church burned down. I want to give you this picture. I thought about bringing the picture tonight. It would have been a little melodramatic, I'm sure. It's one of those pictures that has a velvet cover and a homemade frame. Picture of a person walking across the water. I don't have to identify who that might be. He handed me this picture and he said, tomorrow in church, all I want you to do is one simple thing. I want you to say a prayer for my dead mother. And I want you to have this picture. I have new offices right now at the Baptist Church. I'm debating whether or not to hang that picture in the office. People coming in with all the new furniture and all the new stuff that I have are going to wonder, does this picture go with this office? I'm here to talk to you briefly about the politics of compassion and the politics of purity. Our country these days, it seems, is very much involved in the politics of purity. We don't want this one, we don't want that one. He's too old, he's too black. We can find one excuse after another not to accept another human being. The politics of compassion, however, reaches out to human beings. It reaches out to each of us in this room. I don't know if any of you have been homeless or not. I've not been homeless. I've not been without a meal, not been without a job, not been without a career. But many of these people have none of the things you and I take for granted. There's so much good about this proposal. I can't imagine voting it down. I don't think it's going to hurt the neighborhood. It's going to better the neighborhood. I think the services that have been offered to date will be better services. You guys are shaking your heads. Well, I might shake my head if I was in your place too. The money seems to be there. If it's not located there, I'm not sure it's going to be located anyplace, because people in any area in this community, on the edge of it or somewhere in the middle of it, are going to have arguments why this shelter should not go where it is currently proposed. It seems to me to be a logical flow to move across the street into that area and build this facility. What is so wrong about making it better for the homeless? What is so wrong about that? I come to you as a human being. I can think of nothing better to end this discussion with than a positive vote. It's easy to be negative about things. Sometimes it's not so easy to be positive. But I encourage you to think positively about this, and it would be my hope that this rezoning is allowed. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the city commission? This lady, I got this lady right here. You're next. I didn't see them get it.
My name is Sheila Compton, and I live at 223 Magazine, and Pastor Henderson speaks so eloquently about the politics of compassion. I would like to speak a little now about the politics of reality. I'll tell you a couple of things that have happened in the last 2 years, dreadful things that have happened. Last year, a young man with a van, not a veteran, constantly raced his unlicensed vehicle up and down Magazine Street, around the block at high rates of speed, narrowly missing, running over several neighborhood children. This went on all summer till he was finally evicted from the transition house. At this point, he took up residence in the city parking lot across the street. At mealtime, his wife was allowed to bring dinner to him. Neighborhood children came running to me last year, terrified, as there was a man with his clothes half off laying in the woods behind my house. He was a resident of Transition House. When I called the police, they didn't come. They did, however, suggest that I go back and check and see if he was still there. While on the internet, I discovered that 2 residents of the Transition House at that time were on the Michigan Sex Offenders Registry. One was a man who had been convicted of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. The other was a young lady, 23 years old, not a veteran, who had been convicted of the very same offense, first-degree criminal sexual conduct, including penetration with a child under 13. A very scary man, a resident of the Transition House, still there and has been for at least a year or more, stomped and kicked at my docile, passive 10-pound Boston Terrier who was simply doing nothing but sitting in my yard. This attack was completely unprovoked. She didn't bark or run after him. He just started stomping at her. I ran outside outraged and yelled at him to get away from my dog, and if I ever saw him exhibit such cruelty to any animal in the neighborhood again, he would have to deal with me, and it wouldn't be pleasant. He responded that I should keep my effing dog out of my yard, in my house at all times, or he would be back and he would stomp her again. I called the shelter to report his pathological behavior. They simply said he was weird and would be gone soon. Needless to say, he's still there, right there for the day he turns on a child in this manner. I believe he's that unstable. Last summer, 2 12-year-old neighborhood girls were playing basketball in my yard. I was standing in my kitchen when I saw a middle-aged male resident of the Transition House coming down the sidewalk. He saw the girls, grinned broadly, and made a quick beeline for them. I quickly stepped out my back door and called the girls over to me. The man continued to approach the girls. I told him that this was private property and that he should please stay away from the girls. He then grabbed at his groin area and said, "I got your private property right here," and began to expose himself. Just 2 weeks ago, I saw 2 men who resided at the shelter walk through my backyard and go behind the storage shed. I wondered where they went, as they did not come back out. I walked to my backyard to find them casually drinking a couple of Labatt's. I asked them what they were doing, and they disregarded me. I asked if they were drinking back there, and they rather proudly responded that they sure were. I told them I believed they were breaking the law, and I would appreciate it if they would leave now. They told me they would leave when they were done. Just then, several more residents of the shelter came down the street and went back there. Feeling rather outnumbered, I ran in the house and called the police. By the time they arrived, an all-out brawl was taking place. One person was on top of another, had him by the throat, bashing his head into the ground. A small group of children were crying hysterically from fear. Why did they need to witness such nightmare-provoking events? Residents from the shelter are not allowed to drink there, so some people stash alcoholic beverages in various places around the neighborhood, under rocks, behind trees, in bushes, then come down to their stash places and drink when they feel the need. Last year, when the shelter was full, 2 men who arrived together were turned away. They picked up their belongings and went into the woods across the street. Wondering what they were up to, I kept an eye on them. They both took off their clothes, laid down on a sleeping bag together. Police were called and chased them out of the woods. They put their clothes back on and took their belongings and sat on the curb right in front of my house. At this point, they began swearing at my neighbor and myself for calling the police. If there's already 2 such facilities, there is a home that the veterans own. A couple of doors down from where I live. One of those people walks around the neighborhood swearing and screaming at the top of his lungs, all the while viciously beating himself. I fear for the day when he tires of beating himself and turns on one of the defenseless children or elderly in the neighborhood. If there are already 2 facilities such as this within 1 block in our neighborhood, why must we have another? The majority of the residents at the transition house are not veterans, do not work and stay for months at a time. They do so simply just because they can. Claims of employment rates and short-term residency simply are not valid. How would anyone that is backing this project possibly know that? None of them live anywhere near this neighborhood, do they? Perhaps one of them would like to have this kind of activity going on their block? I think not. Do any of them have children? Do they love their children and always want to protect them from predators living nearby? Of course they do. Please help us protect our children by not allowing this rezoning to take place. We live in fear as it is. Please don't allow this fear to be compounded 60-fold. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Now, no, there's another gentleman.
Is there?
Yes. Where's the other gentleman? Yes. You can come after this gentleman. Yes.
My name is Chris DeBeal. I'm a social worker, have been in this area for a long time. I don't represent the homeless shelter. I'm not associated in any way, nor do I live in the block. I know Sheila, I know Lori, very good people. A couple things I want to say. We had homeless people here from downstate before there was ever a homeless shelter, before there was ever a domestic violence shelter. I know because I worked with them. As long as we have I-75 that heads this way, we're going to have homeless people. Yes, we did have them sleeping in garages and in backyards. And the homeless shelter for us has been a very positive thing. One of the things that was said, which is absolutely true, there are 20 children at the shelter. Now obviously these aren't dual diagnosed substance abuse, sexual predators. They're just children. And they deserve a place to live. They deserve a chance. We're going to have them, whether we build a new shelter, whether we keep the one we have, or whether we never have a shelter here. They've been here before we started, they're going to be coming. The reason for that is because these people are looking for some happiness, and they believe they're going to find it outside somewhere, rather than internally. And they're going to keep searching until they do. Some of these people need a chance, deserve a chance. I'm not going to stand here and say that's the best location in the world. I don't know that it's the best location in the world. But I will say this. We need a homeless shelter. We need a good facility. If we don't, the problems will compound more than we have now. Thank you.
My name's Nathan Spalding, and I work for the Salvation Army. And in February of 1995, I became homeless, lost my job, the money ran out. I stayed at that homeless shelter for 4 months, I believe it was. And the proximity, you know, I didn't have any money to buy gasoline, and the proximity to it being downtown, close to downtown, was a tremendous assistance in finding employment. And the only contact I've ever had with local law enforcement because of any criminal activity, I'm the guy that got robbed.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Would you come forward, please? You can come after this lady.
My name is Diane Tavlot, and I also live in the neighborhood. I only have one question, and that is, where were these guys 8 years ago? The planning and development for this facility. They now have 8 years of poor management, of hard feelings in one neighborhood. How are they gonna undo all that? That's a beautiful facility. As far as compassion goes, I make the best pickles and tomatoes, canned, and I gave them up to the homeless shelter. I don't have anything against these people for being homeless. I also was homeless for a time. I went to family and friends. So this is a very nice facility, but what I'd like to know is, where were you 8 years ago? And to leave these people in deplorable conditions. I hope that the commission votes on this in a positive manner, but not at the cost of our neighborhood.
There's another gentleman, isn't it? Yes.
My name's Jim Pilcher, and I live in the neighborhood in question. I don't think any of us disagree that this is a worthy project. It can help a lot of people. But I feel that it shouldn't be placed in a residential neighborhood near the downtown area, next to our prime tourist site, the Sioux Locks. We've had a lot of problems in 8 years since the shelter's been located down there. I won't get in, I think everybody's covered the main problems we've had. And the perplexing thing is that it's not the 80% of people they help that we're concerned with. That's great, that's admirable that they help these people. It's those 20% that are kicked out of the shelter, that are kicked out into our neighborhood, into the city of Sault Ste. Marie. These are the ones we're concerned about, those 20%. Joe Collard made a quote in the Evening News: "Those who fail to attend meetings, find employment, stay sober, and follow the rules are immediately kicked out of the facility." Unquote. Where are they kicked out to? Our neighborhood, or anybody else's neighborhood. It should not be in a residential neighborhood. It should be outside of a residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to?
Hello, my name is Sherry Naxton, and I'm with the Salvation Army. I'm the social service worker there, and I know my voice doesn't carry, so I'm sorry about that. I'll do the best I can so everyone can hear me. We have put up over I just grabbed some statistics for you. We also help people who are in need of emergency lodging. First thing I do is I need to find out if there's room at the shelter. They must seek help there first. When there isn't, then we try to provide the necessary lodging that they need. And over the last 3.5 years, we've helped 160 people with 418 nights of lodging. 55% were single people. I know that we desperately need a shelter for the people. This facility offers many things that the shelter we now have in our community doesn't provide, such as laundry. I've had a lot of people from the shelter come asking for laundry facilities. I love the fact that the rec room is away from the apartment units, because especially when you have a lot of children, there are people who are working nights who need to rest. And currently the children are running up and down and they're just unable to get the rest they need in order to do their job. We've helped some clients because they can't climb stairs, physical reasons. And this facility would also take care of that. Also, my heart goes out to the residents because I know very well what some of the things that you're facing there with the unruly people that are breaking all the rules in our community. And I'm thankful that Community Action has a wonderful reputation in our community, and they would be powerfully involved for 5 years to maybe set this on a new pace for our community. And not everyone that's staying in the shelter, as already has been brought up, are sex offenders or alcoholics, although they certainly are there. And the management there, somehow things have got to be changed. I know, like you were speaking about a resident doing being on the night patrol there, that just doesn't work. It doesn't work. But I think all together, I just hate to see us miss out on this, because we need it so desperately. And we need those changes so desperately. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
My name is Leanne Krakowski, and I'm here wearing 2 hats. One as a citizen, and one as the manager of the Eastern Upper Peninsula Food Bank, which is a national nonprofit organization. The shelter vet center is one of my programs. In my position in the capacity as manager, I monitor the shelter by going in and checking its food storage and the site for the cleanliness. The shelter not only gets food for the residents on site, but I can also send individuals who are not staying there over to get assistance. They're one of my largest open food pantries. I get a lot of people that call and ask me for help, and because they're located right within the city, especially now that I've lost the Presbyterian Church, which used to be one of my pantries, I'm able to send people over to the homeless shelter to get food and assistance that don't live there. They are in serious need of a new building, and this is definitely a beautiful building. It's depressing what they are trying to work with right now. The building itself is depressing. I don't know how many of you have actually been in that building, how many of the residents have actually been in that building. What they're trying to work with what they have, they're working with very little. It would not be financially feasible even to fix that building up. They definitely have to have a new building. One of the reasons for keeping it in that area is that it is within walking distance of the downtown for purposes of employment and medical. One of the problems they are having to deal with right now is the move that FIA made out to 3 Mile and 129. And I can understand some of the residents saying, put it out there, it would be close to FIA and Sioux Tribe. However, it still would not be within walking distance for employment and majority of the medical needs that they need. Majority of these people do not have vehicles. I have to honestly say that when all this discussion came up regarding the new building, in the 6 years I've been dealing with the shelter, I had not heard any of the major complaints that are being voiced publicly now being voiced. And a part of me couldn't help wonder if some of that concern might also have to do with putting a beautiful new building like this in that area, what it would do to increase the tax value of that area for the local residents. I'm sorry, that's something that I was wondering. I'm not saying that there are not problems. I just think that the problems are being caused by the minority, not the majority. I have had a few problems myself in regards to some of the clientele, some problems of them coming over to the warehouse and causing me some problems. However, I've called the shelter and with my concerns, and when I have concerns, and they take care of them. I really hate to see that everything has come to the point that it has. And I think a couple options that should have been looked at when the shelter was first established 8 years ago. One of the most important things I think that should have been done, and I don't know if it was ever done, is I think at least 2 of the area residents should have been asked to sit on the board for the shelter home in the vet center. And I don't know if that was ever done since it was being placed in their area. If it is rezoned and the shelter should go into that area again, I think that is something that needs to seriously be considered, that 2 residents be placed on the board so that they can have a say in the day-to-day operations of the shelter and the concerns they have and help to work them out before they get out of hand. And I'm sorry that there's such a short timeline. I didn't realize that there was a timeline with July 15th. Because it's real obvious that things are quite heated between all parties. And it's too bad that before the commission makes a decision that everybody couldn't be brought to the table again with a mediator. We do have a mediation program here in town, and it's too bad everybody can't be brought back to the table to sit down with a third party that has been trained in mediation to maybe hassle out some of the problems that are going on right now. I know there are concerns with the number of clients that are staying in the shelter and the fact that a lot of them are not from this area originally. I know from having worked out of a state agency for a number of years that there are many times that the police, and I think Louis can back me up on this if he's still here, that the police will pick someone up who has a one-way ticket from someplace downstate in their pocket, that another social agency has sent them this way. When I worked out of the state agency, it used to be a running joke that the other agencies sent their clients up here because it was the end of the road and they couldn't send them any further. And I think that's still pretty true today. 75 is the end of the road. This is where they get sent. They don't have any place else to go. They don't have a buck in their pocket. I have also heard people voice concern about people being released from prison and staying there. One of the major concerns I have heard over this, if it's someone who has been in prison for child abuse or molesting stayed there. Well, as it's been pointed out to you, there is a site, the Michigan State Police site, that you can take and go into. I'm a strong child, anybody, several of the commission know me, I'm a very strong child advocate. I sit on a 10-county board for children who have been abused and neglected. I monitored that site continually. I monitored that site last on Saturday. There is nobody staying at the shelter right now because as part of the parole, they have to register with the police, if I'm correct, Louis, they have to register when they come into town where their residency is going to be. There's nobody listed on that register right now staying at the shelter. There is somebody within a 2-block residence, but he's not at the shelter. Everybody has a lot of genuine concerns, and I hope for all parties that something can be worked out. But like I said, I think one of the big things is regardless of where this shelter goes, the residents in any area where it goes, at least 2 of the residents should be invited to sit on the board. Thank you.
Do you want to get that?
I've listened to both sides of that, and I live in the neighborhood, and I've watched. I think a lot of people look at the neighbors as we are. Oh, I'm Denise Gordon. I live right down the street. A lot of people wonder why we haven't spoken out sooner about our problems with the shelter and that. One of our first meetings, one of the neighbors happened to say, back of our minds, we always thought that building was in such bad shape, we didn't have to wait much longer and it would be gone. The building itself is just going to fall down, and then we don't have to deal with it. So we kindly tolerated the people's problems. The good ones, yes, we helped in every way we could. I've given things to people down there. I've done all kinds of stuff for people there. But as long as we have things the way they are run down there and allowed to go in and stay for months at a time, and it's a joke. You know, I've seen people come into that place year after year from all over the state. It's a circuit to them. They go from one homeless shelter to the other so they don't have to work. They don't have to do this. Things like this have to be put in check. You know, as long as Sault Ste. Marie has a shelter, and one like this people are going to flock to. We have a family down there with 11 children that's from out of town that were just shipped here. Parents didn't like their jobs, so they came here. How many other families seeing a facility like this in a nice, cozy little neighborhood, nobody complains, well, at least we didn't, wouldn't love to come here? I'd like to see something, but for our own people, for the city of Sault Ste. Marie, for the county. This is, you know, with the criteria they have on their grant to keep the money coming in, you've got drugs, you've got AIDS, you've got this, you've got that, to meet the federal and state criteria to get the money in here. And if they don't meet the grant, the money don't come. And then either we're footing the bill, or they're going out of town to get the people that have the criteria to fit the grant to come in. And where does the homeless people of Sault Ste. Marie go? They don't fit into the criteria to fit into this center. If we're gonna do it, let's do it in such a way that we have it set up that it takes care of Sault Ste. Marie, not everywhere else, because that's what this place is gonna do. It's not, we've seen too much. We can sit here and we could go on with horror story after horror story of all the things we've had. But if we're gonna do a homeless shelter, let's do it right, and let's do one that's set up for Sault Ste. Marie, not for everybody else. Not for the drug abusers, not for the AIDS victims, you know, not for this, not for that. I'd like to see Sault Ste. Marie people, not everywhere else. And this, they're gonna have to ship them in out of state just to fit the criteria to keep the funding to come in. Thank you.
Are you asking to be recognized, Mr. Carr?
I'm Mark Carr. I'm a board member on the foundation. And just like to address some of those issues. We do not go out and recruit people to come to the shelter. They find out about our existence through other means, through referral sources, FIA, Salvation Army, veterans organizations, just the community at large. Currently, we serve about 75% from Sault Ste. Marie, Chippewa County, and Moose and Nakon. We have about 50% over the last 8 years who are veterans, and the new facility will have some rooms dedicated to veterans to fit the VA guidelines. And I guess I just want to say that we're not out there recruiting people to fit any grant guidelines. Homeless people come with lots of baggage. They have all the problems that you are explaining. Part of the problem over the last 8 years is the current building does not fit the safety needs of the residents or the neighborhood. And the new building will go a long ways to improve that situation. The grant application is for a new building and the program in the new building. We will not have funding to continue in that old building on the corner. We do not want to remain there because we don't want that building anymore. It's not ours, we rent it. And I can't think of anything else right now, but we are not, our interest is to promote the safety of not just the neighborhood, but the residents involved. And I think this new program will. But the real crux of the matter is the land use. It's an appropriate land use in its location. RM1 is current zoning that we're in. We're moving across the street. We only need approval for a change in the zoning in that extends the RM1 boundary out block. And when that happens, the old shelter will disappear. If the new zoning doesn't take place, we will be there with the current level of funding, which will probably allow problems to persist. Thank you.
Are you want to be recognized?
I'm Fred Carr.
Okay.
Came from Markham Island High School. 33 years ago, I marched off to Vietnam. I rise in opposition to this homeless shelter, because it is not for veterans. It's just for homeless. If you build it, they will come. That right there is an edifice to a failed society solution to a homeless problem. As one member got up and said, she found help with her family and friends. That's what I suggest to the people that come to this town looking for a handout. Go back to your family and friends. The only way we're going to strengthen society is to support the family unit, not carry the veteran's name through the mud through a homeless shelter. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Hi,
are
I'm
you
Linda
asking?
Wirtz.
Are you asking to be recognized?
Linda Wirtz.
Okay.
From Catholic Social Services. I'm the branch director there and therapist. In my earlier years, I did some internship at the homeless shelter, and I think this building that they're building or want to build would be a great asset to the community. Also to the children that happen to be part of the community that have to come there. I worked there, volunteered actually, my internship, and why there, it's not just people who have mental illness or drug abuse. The homeless could also be a woman with children whose husband has left and she's homeless, has no income, no family. A family that has been devastated by fire and have no place to go temporarily. So this building really needs to be built and really needs the community spirit behind it. There are many people who are considered homeless out there and really need someone, a helping hand temporarily to get back on their feet. Thank you.
Father Don Chirota from, I used to be at St. Joseph's in the Sioux here, and I arrived here 15 years ago. When I got here, I had a convent that wasn't being used. And I talked to my people. We could have made it into doctor's offices. We could have made it a place for maybe insurance, something like this here. But I thought we had a real need in the area for our women, our alcoholic women. And so we turned it into a place for New Hope House for Women. Now, when the word got around that I was thinking about this on Minneapolis Avenue, where the church is, in the convent, there was consternation. In fact, we were down here trying to get this place rezoned, and I don't know, Mayor, if you were there that night when all these people were there, and we talked about this. At the same time, I never forget, one of the men, he was very vitriolic. He really wanted to punch me out, and I said, wait a while, pal, wait a while. What happened then when we started, about that gentleman, one night I was out in the rose garden around St. Joseph's, and I saw him coming across the street to talk to some of these women. And I thought, we have a convert. We got a convert in the area. We really did. And so what has happened here is that the place has been going now for 12 years, and we have 800 women that have gone through that house. 800. Fantastic, really. It's a credit. It's a credit to the community. It's a credit to all of you. When I say all of you, I mean it in the plural. I really do. Is Pastor Henderson still here? David, are you still here? Yeah, hey, good. Recall when we had a lot of people that had needs for, say, shelter and what have you, as far as poverty was concerned. And so we had about 5 places down there at the bomb shelter. Exactly. But at the same time, these places, it got to a point where we couldn't take care of it. Many people that were coming into looking for a shelter. So I feel as though that I know the panic that some of you are feeling right now. I really do. But at the same time, people on Minneapolis Street, they felt the same kind of panic also. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It really didn't. You sure have heard some of the things I was being told. Our kids in the school are going to be raped by these women. That's a new question, I guess. But at the same time, like I said, eventually, it really resolved itself. And so you go down Minneapolis now, the shelter is still there for these alcoholic women, and everything is fine. It's beautiful. And I think the same thing can happen here with this new facility. I really do. Because there will be, I think there will be surveillance in such a way that it will be a compliment to everyone concerned. It's inside of me now, and I share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman back.
My name's Ken Murphy. I'm a property owner in the neighborhood. Father, with all due respect, the people on Ridge Street and Magazine Street have lived with it, and it has happened. It's a whole different thing from a new facility moving into an area and not knowing what will happen. We know what it's like and what we've seen for 8 years, and it's the point of this whole process should be focused back to the location. It's it should never have been put where it was in the first place. It happened overnight, it seemed. They just moved in. I don't know what process happened. I wasn't involved. But we didn't expect any of this, and it just happened. And it's in an area where
people have upgraded their homes. The whole street looks better, except you get down to that corner, it's a mess. And it's a block away from the locks. They're trying to promote this lock side district, the whole, upgrade the whole area, and I just want to focus it back to location. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
My name is Mike Ferraro. I am a Vietnam veteran. I was born here in the Sioux, and about 4 years ago, I spent 3 weeks there. There was a lot of support. It was one of the most embarrassing times in my life that my family had to go there. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I think most people who go there are going to pick themselves up if they've got half a chance. I've worked steady since then. I've got a real good job now, and given a chance, I believe most of the people are going to do good at this place. I think they must have learned a few things in 8 years, and they're going to have to change a few things. Well, you're saying no, sir, but I believe. Right, Father? Thank you.
We're gonna cut this off pretty soon. It's been an hour and a half. I think we've heard from almost everybody.
Hello, I'm Joanne Carr, and wife to Fred Carr. My son Chris Carr lives down the street there on Ridge Street next to the homeless, or a couple houses down. And of course I worry about my grandchildren. But I've also had something to do with the homeless shelter. I belong to St. Isaac Jogues Church, and a few years back they came to us looking for possibly Marquette Hall using. At the time, and throughout the night, I've wondered about the condition of the Wigra building, and why have we allowed them still to be using that building when we all know it's condemnable. And then the other thing that sticks in my mind, Fred did work there before, and to his I don't know how to say it. He didn't bring this up, and I will. They have a listing of rules that you do, do's and don'ts. And I don't know if it was number 43. That's the number that sticks in my mind. Is no sex on the washing machine. Father, did you have to put that there? You know, do you have that? You know, Pastor Henderson. You know, that's what it's like at this homeless shelter. Maybe it's the management of this homeless shelter. I don't know, you know, but I'm telling you, that rule was there. No sex on the washing machine. And that's the kind of thing that is going down on the corner of Ridge Street and Fort Street. Thank you.
Are you ready to vote, you guys?
Hi, my name is Peggy Neal. I'm a resident of the Sault Ste. Marie. I'm born and raised in the West End, though. I think if everybody just stopped for a couple of minutes and searched their hearts, they know it's not about this facility and what services it's going to provide to human beings. We're all compassionate people. It's the location. And if you reach down and look and was honest with yourself, there's not one person here that would want it in their front yard because of what does take place down there. Mismanagement, I don't know. But I know I wouldn't want it in my front yard, my grandchildren to see what takes place. It's not about services to anybody. I think if there's everybody here that has a heart would help out a person. But if it was in their front yard and what takes place down there, it happened in their front yard, they would be opposed to this building also. The location is the problem. Thank you.
One more.
My name is David Daly. I'm a resident in the neighborhood. I was born and raised there. I've been there almost 40 years now. My family has had a home there for 75 years. I have no intention of leaving the neighborhood. I have to reiterate some of the things like Mr. Murphy said. We're all doing our best to make the neighborhood better than it was. This is a heck of a thing to have to bring up, but when I was being raised in that neighborhood, in order to get people to know where you lived, you had to say, well, I lived down by the whorehouses. Okay, that is gone. Okay, the neighborhood is improving. Now my kids have to live with the stigma. Their claim to fame is, well, you know, you can't say, well, I live 3 blocks west of the post office, because they don't know where the post office is, or the Sioux Co-op. You can say, I live by the homeless shelter. Oh, now I know where you live. I mean, we've had this in our neighborhood for 8 years now. It's been very poorly managed to this point. We're saturated. We can't take any more of the misdoings that are going on down there. We don't want it in our residential neighborhood. It may not seem residential to people who have beautiful homes, live somewhere that is different than our neighborhood. We are a close-knit community though. We're all friends. We've united into one family over this. We don't want it in our neighborhood anymore. We don't disagree that this is a noble idea. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful building. We don't doubt that a lot of people need help, but we think we've done our time with it, and we believe it should be put somewhere else. So if it does continue to be mismanaged or if there are problems, we've had our share of them already. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. City Commission.
I have quite a few questions. I don't know who can answer them.
Just a minute. If you've got a question.
Yes, I have several. Yes, Your Honor.
The public hearing is closed, ma'am. The commission is gonna discuss now.
Okay,
Who
what
would
is
you
the
like?
length of stay? I don't know who I asked this to.
Who do you wanna call up?
That's what I'm
Commissioner?
asking. Who's here from the, transition?
A board
Authority?
member?
Yeah. Mark, maybe? How long can they stay?
Just a minute now, just a minute.
I'll handle it.
Just a minute.
How about somebody that actually works at the facility? Let's see
Because-
somebody that's there.
I'll let you run it.
You will.
I know.
Mark, or
Mr.
this
You want
young lady?
Mr. Carr to come up?
What
Mr.
is
Carr.
it? Okay.
This is Louise Ball, the director at the shelter right now.
Right. What is the length of stay right now?
The average length of stay, is about between 60 to 90 days.
Is that the maximum? Is there any maximum or minimum? Can I come there, or can anyone come there and just stay there? One gentleman said he stayed there 8 months.
We make exceptions for people that are disabled, that are trying to, secure income from disability, such as SSI or SDA. It's a very lengthy process, and we have a lot of people that come in that are disabled and are unable to work, and we work with them until they're able to secure their income.
Okay, if they go out and stay a night out, can they come back and start this procedure all over again? There's certain questions people have asked me. Okay, that's it. For how long? Is there a time frame? 6 months, 2 years?
We give them a second chance, couple weeks, once they've, made the commitment to try again. Like, for instance, if they're drinking, if they, agree to not be drinking, then we'll allow them to come.
That's closely monitored, folks.
Yes.
Okay, someone touched on staffing, and there's only gonna be 2 people at the new place, or maybe Mr. Cowrie or Mark could address it. Is there gonna be more? I don't know.
Did you wanna address this? I'm not.
It's up to the mayor.
I wanna know, is there gonna be more staffing?
Who do you wanna ask?
Okay, I'll ask,
Mr. Engel wrote the grant words, so maybe he could.
I'll call Mr. Engel. Will you come up to the microphone? We'll get somebody up.
That's what I'm asking, who knows, who's knowledgeable?
Okay.
Johan Ingold, I wrote the grant that is being discussed. The first point that I have to make is the fact that there will be more than one grant. So therefore, what is in this grant is not the sum total of all the situation. The grant covers 10 of the total units. And for those 10 units, there will be one case manager and an administrator.
Okay, but what would be the total, Mr. Johan, at any given time, once this is built?
It will be at least 2 more.
So it'd be a total of 4 on, 24 hours a day?
Yes.
So this question of more staffing and
Yes.
and to keep things in check would be much better then.
Yes.
Thank you. That answers
No,
it.
you cannot. The commissioner has the floor.
Okay, now this would go to either Mr. Calery or Mr. McDaniel. Lady addressed the situation that you'd already received $100,000 from the Indians, or that this is forthcoming or is already. What is the situation on that to address her issue?
I believe you have a letter that's there from Mishna indicating the
Come to the microphone,
concern
Mr.
that the
Calery.
city had.
Would you come to the microphone, please?
I just want to get some of these questions that were brought up corrected.
You have a letter there that addressed the question of the $15,000 contribution from the city, which indicates that this would have been the value of a contribution over 10 years. There is on the leveraging question a 31 items in which we are required to list in the instruction catalog, which is a separate document, which you don't have any copy of. We're required to list the proposed leveraging sources, and at the time when we submit the final or second documentation, we have to at that time include what type of monies now you propose to do this, which ones were you successful in obtaining. And as we speak, there are at least 16 letters that have come back of that 31 that have indicated either cash and or in kind. I repeat though, those are leveraging. They don't have to do with constructing the facility. I think the monies that Mark talked about are the monies that will construct a facility.
Thank you. One quick question, maybe you can answer. How do the investors get their money back? I know Mark had said there were several banks or, okay. Mark, then thank you.
It's his money.
Okay, yeah, how do they, the homeless aren't gonna pay for it, I'm sure. But how do they recoup their money?
Right, this is, goes to the program I spoke of earlier, the low-income housing tax credit. It came out of the Tax Reform Act in 1986. Basically in 86, they took away all the benefits for owning or investing in real estate except this one little program that they created, which allows an investor to invest their money into a qualified affordable housing project, and they're able to get an annual tax credit against their, tax liability every year for making that investment. So it's like a 9% annual credit that they're able to basically write off over 10 years. And so, by doing that, that's where they get the return from. It doesn't come out of any of the cash flow or revenue of the project. It's just the fact that they made that investment, then they're able to claim a credit then against their tax liability.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, everyone's talking about problems up in that area, and I see we have a gentleman in there that I think if anyone had any problem, I think he would, and that's Mr. Jorgensen. Do you have problems?
Hey.
Can I ask Mr. Jorgensen, do you have, I've never heard of any.
No, I've had one attempt break-in in the last 10 years. Don't know who it was, they never caught it.
Yeah, so, I think if you had something like him, I think that would be it. My other question, and Mr. Carr answered it, is the old building staying, and that answer was no, is that correct?
Yeah, it's not gonna be torn down.
But, it's not gonna be a facility like they had mentioned, okay. This is for Mr. Nebel. This was an RM1 up till last year, is that correct? That area that they're going to?
No, it's been industrial, the area that we're talking about, it's been industrial,
I thought that was just changed a while back.
no.
Okay, I stand corrected.
We changed, the zoning district to the east of that, to a, right, it used to be tourist service, I believe, and we.
Okay, I knew there was something, okay,
Residential.
I stand corrected then, thank you. We have the police chief in here, and someone made a statement, that's the first place they go. I don't know if that is correct. Someone in a letter I received said that that's the first place the police, you know, they don't check anywhere else, they head there first. Is that correct, police chief? I'm sure you do go up there, but I don't, you know.
Commissioner Van, well, certainly we will go there. And part of the reason we go there is because there are a number of people that we may be looking for either by description that we may have or by a name that might be registered when people, you know, assume residency there. So, you know, we're gonna go there and check as a matter of, you know, as I think sound police work basically is you have people from out of the area that might be staying, you know, at a location you're going to check. It's not unusual for us to stop at a motel or something too. If
Exactly.
we have information. So I mean, it isn't exclusive to that, but we do go there, absolutely.
My last question, we have New Hope Home right across the street here. Maybe the police chief, have you had I'm sorry, I don't know who to ask this question to. Has there been, a lot of problem with that? Father Don talked about, New Hope Home up on Minneapolis,
We don't have a lot of calls at the facility. You know, it's really hard to say, when an incident might occur outside the facility. If somebody at New Hope is involved, they may not, you know, we may carry that under the address where it happened as opposed to that individual's address. So it is hard to say, but we don't deal at the New Hope facility itself with a lot of problems.
thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm gonna address my first question made to Mark Carr, because, Mark, if you'd come up, please. You are on the board of directors for the Vietnam Homeless Shelter, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, are there other members of the board here present tonight?
Jim Rose is here.
Jim Rose is here, and,
Emma Fowler. And Percy Brown.
okay. I assume that this board, like any other board, would have a chairperson or someone in that capacity. Who's the highest ranking person you have here tonight of that board?
Jim Rose is the vice president.
Okay, I'd like to ask some questions of Jim Rose, if I may then.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Good evening.
Jim, all of us received two well-written, documented letters from two of the residents that they put a lot of thought into. And one of the questions that came up, and was mentioned tonight also, was that if this new facility is built in the proposed location, they are under the impression that the existing facility will still be utilized as a homeless shelter, and instead of one, there'd be two or maybe more than two.
No,
Would you address this,
no,
please?
that's not true. The Magazine Street shelter will be vacated.
Okay. In other words, then, you are going to have a shelter in that neighborhood.
Yes,
It'll either be the old shelter that you do some renovation to within limits, or a brand new one, is that correct?
that's correct, Dave.
So there's gonna be a shelter in that neighborhood, okay. How many, if the new shelter is built, what's the maximum number of clients that it would house at any one time?
Who would have to confirm that?
Okay, if you would, please.
What was it? Well,
Anybody know?
30 units, so it'll be 30, and I can't tell you, if somebody's got 2 kids, 6 kids, whatever, but.
yeah, and then there's, 6 family units?
30 altogether, Jim.
Yeah, about 30 altogether.
So 30 units that could house 1, 2, 3, or 4.
24 single and 6 family.
Oh, 24 single and 6 families, so that your max would be 24, and let's say 6 times 3, 18, so you're roughly talking 40 people. What's your capacity at the present location? Max?
Just about 40, 45.
Okay.
In the winter time, we end up bumping people downstairs if we have to.
because of the weather.
Another question was brought up by one of the residents. Will the local homeless have a priority for this shelter? And I think local was used here to mean tri-county area.
Personally, I think they always have been. We don't advertise.
Mhm.
People find us out. If we look at our data that we've collected since we've been there, the majority of people that end up coming to the shelter have been evicted or foreclosed from apartments, or family kicked them out or something like that. And certainly we do take referrals from St. Ignace because we are a tri-county, and we just started keeping statistics there about 3 years ago. But we're primarily Chippewa County, Sault Ste. Marie. This is the service that we want to provide.
Okay. Jim, it was mentioned already by you and others that you are going to have a homeless shelter in the neighborhood, be it where it is now or in the new one.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah. Okay. This has been, I think, a learning experience for everyone. I've driven down Ridge many times, and at times it's not pretty. You know, what is there? There are scenes there that probably should not be. These people have endured this for 8 years without complaining, to my knowledge, to the city commission. Now, being the fact that you're going to have a shelter in that location, and we've all learned, I think, by this process, what plans are there to alleviate the concerns these people have brought up that I think are probably very legitimate? I'm sure that maybe there's something you hadn't thought of in the past, and maybe you need more time on this, but I've got to believe the board of directors does need to address this, because you said you're going to stay there one way or the other, and you're at the location you have now legally. That's not a question. But what are you planning on doing to alleviate the concerns these residents have?
Well, I think planning in the future is certainly evening security. One of the thoughts that came up was that we would contact the Criminal Justice Department at the college and see if we can get a commitment through the criminal justice system to have night security through the criminal justice system. I think the other part is installing security cameras on the outside of the building so that we can see what's going on, so that person can see what's going on. The building was designed for a manager to be by the front door, to be able to monitor the security of the building on the outside in the evening off hours, kind of a scenario.
You think that more needs to be done than is being currently done?
Well, I'm certainly hearing it from the neighborhood, and all I can say is that I hope it's not falling on deaf ears, that we are very concerned about that, and we're going to be trying to address a lot of these issues, as we become aware of them.
One of the main issues that a number of the residents mentioned was not the people in the facility, but the people that are out of the facility. What obligations
20%?
do you have to them regarding that?
Well, I even think it's less than 20%, but that's a matter of argument. But people do violate rules, and we do ask them to leave, and it is a problem if they're hanging around the neighborhood. And if they are hanging around the neighborhood, and if they're on people's property, then they're trespassing. They're violating laws. Other people, we've had since our existence, we had 130 people actually leave Sault Ste. Marie, left town, and were afforded gas money. The bus doesn't come here anymore. It comes to St. Ignace, and they take the stagecoach down to St. Ignace, catch the bus. But we've had 137 people relocate out of town. Not everything runs smoothly like you'd like it to have, but you try to minimize as much as possible.
It was mentioned by Leanne Kwiatkowski that a recommendation might be to have a couple of the local residents on the board, because they can probably see a side to this that no one else does. What's your feeling regarding that?
Mr. Coulard and I
both talked about that, and we thought that was a good idea. That we would welcome a person on the board.
But you're certainly open to making things better than they have been.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
So, Jim, while you're up there, these 41 people that are in the building right now, will they have first choice of moving into this new building?
They will just be moved over to that building, yes.
So
It's
that
not a
actually,
matter of-
they'll fill the building right up, more or so.
Well, like you say, our family of 11 that came up from downstate that ended up on Sugar Island that then became homeless. You know, that is that's a difficult scenario to deal with when you have a family of 11.
How often do you pull inspection on the building?
What kind of
like walking in to see how the people are doing, or what they're doing, or?
I defer that to Louise, the director. The question was on, you want to come up here, Louise? Was on inspections?
Patrol it or inspection, one or the other, to see what's going on in the building at, say, at 10 o'clock at night, or? Nobody. Like, I was asking him is, how often do you make inspection? Is somebody wrong with doing it 10 o'clock at night, or 9 o'clock, or
Yes.
10, 11?
Yes, there is. We have evening staff people that are in the building, and they walk around the building, and they walk upstairs and monitor, make sure everything's in order.
Okay. And the city doesn't do any inspection of the building as far as that?
We have a city
Yeah.
occupancy, right, once a
Okay.
year. We have city occupancy that is inspected by the city inspecting, Mark Sunstrom.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Your Honor. Jim, I have a question for you before you run off.
Sure.
Driver's license. I know that most people have a driver's license or a state identification card, which is a form of driver's license. They just can't drive. Do you check in the facility now? Do you check driver's license or a state identification when a person or a family or something like that moves in?
We haven't in the past. I wear another hat. I work for the Chippewa County Sheriff's Department in the Community Services Program that deals with the prisoners working out in the community. And I checked with the sheriff, and one of the things that we want to do that we can go through the lane system with the Sheriff's Department, and we can do a background check on people to see if there's any wants or warrants on people coming in, because we have no idea of who is coming into that shelter and what their background is. So one of the things that we are going to be implementing, besides already looking at sexual perpetrators off of the internet, is that we're going to be contacting the Sheriff's Department, and their person on duty will be able to run names through their computer system as a form of checking background checks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
This question's for Mr. McDaniels or Mr. Cowrie. If you could tell me whether or not the new facility, if it's enacted, would be driver's license checked. I mean, if when somebody checks in, will you be computerized so you can run a driver's license, or?
This is one of the things in hearing a lot of the comments tonight and reading the letters that you were citing, and that is that, you know, from our standpoint, it's going to be a new day when it comes to the management of this property. There are things that may have been going on that, from our standpoint, you know, we would not invest in it if it would continue with some of these things. One of the standard things that we look at when we underwrite a management of a facility like this is checking the criminal backgrounds and running liens on anybody that's coming in, but also doing, you know, all the verifications that we're required to do of residents coming in. That's one of them, and that would be a requirement of anything we would invest in.
Okay.
We have very sophisticated management program that we look to have. And that's why we asked Community Action to come in as the new owner, co-owner, and management group to work with the vets on this.
Well, the next question, if you can answer it, is if the new facility is set into place, how long would a person or a family be able to stay there if they stayed unemployed? In other words, if a person decided, I don't want to work, I'm just going to sit around and enjoy myself. I'm not sure if you can answer it or not. If you can't, you can.
I can't answer it.
Okay.
I can't answer that question.
I mean, I didn't know
That's
if-
something that will be designed as this project evolves with the service program, because some of that will relate to the program funds that may be coming in from all the different sources we're looking at. There's different ways that you deal with that with the programs. We have some projects that we've invested in that are very specific about those requirements. Some, you either gotta be in school, or you gotta have a job, or enrolled in a job training program. If you haven't got one of those three things, you're out of the program and you're placed somewhere else. You're not kicked out, the door doesn't open up and you're out on the street. Basically, you're coordinating that with other service providers in the area to get those people placed in the right place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Commissioner?
Your Honor, after listening to everything we have, I make a motion that we table action on this by the Commissioner on the first meeting in July, which would be held on Wednesday, July the 5th.
Support.
Now, we gotta vote on the tabling motion first. Okay. We're voting on the tabling motion. Roll call.
We need everybody to be here.
Do I have a roll call?
Motion is to table this item until July 5th, Wednesday, July 5th at 7 p.m. Mayor Lawrence?
No.
Commissioner Boss? Oh,
Yes.
No, you can't vote.
you can't.
On the tabling motion, I think you can.
He can't vote on this
This has
issue.
nothing to do with the,
This is on this item, it's no different than the discussion, you should not vote on this item.
your feeling is I can't vote?
Now, what, I voted.
Yes.
Who's next?
I was calling Commissioner Vasquez, he abstains. Commissioner Gagne?
Yes.
Commissioner Hornstra?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Yes.
Commissioner McGahey?
No.
It's 3-2.
Motion passed. The next item,
The next item is on the tax exempt.
it's, the next item is a tax exemption ordinance for EUP Veteran Center.
Can I do anything with that?
Your Honor, I motion to have this placed on the next, at the next meeting also.
Report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. 2 noes.
Was it 2 no?
We'll take a few minutes recess till the people leave. 3-2.
I got one thing left.
People wanna leave. It was tabled till the
So at the
July
next meeting
5th
though,
meeting.
we're not gonna be able, there's no public discussion or anything, right? It's just being tabled again to.
Till everybody's here.
We had to have a